Rav Soloveitchik used to say when he grew up, he remembers that they used to have a Rambam open the entire week. Some say you're supposed to close the Sefer, but not in the Soloveitchik home. In the house of Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, the father of Yashabir, they had a Shver Rambam open all week, so whenever you had guests coming, they would discuss a Shver Rambam. And that was, the entire household revolved around this difficult Rambam, the Shver Rambam. Okay? You remember the joke we said the last week? Right? I'm not a racist, but they say a racist joke. The Sfardim are always mocked, they're not lamdanim. The Sfardim are much stronger in halacha. They never learn the fine-tune, the nuanced thinking of the Lithuanian system. So they say that Rav Chaim of Brisk gets up to Shemayim, and he says, what did you do? He says, I solved the most difficult Rambams. He says, that's what you did? Okay, that's a reason to let you into Gan Eden. But let's call the Rambam and see if he agrees with all of your resolutions. So they call the Rambam, and he says, Rav Chaim gave this yishuv, this reconciliation for this Rambam. Rav Moshe, did you really intend that this was the pshat? He says that's not was the intent of the Ram. That's not what I intended. I had a different gears than the Yerushalmi. That's why he couldn't figure it out, right? And one after the other, and he says, Chaim, the Rambam doesn't agree with your yeshuvim on the Rambam. He says, oh, he's a Sephardi. What does he know how to learn a Rambam?
That's how you answer a
That's how a Sephardi, what does a Sephardi understand about a Shver Rambam? It's changed already. Now all the grandchildren of Bavad Yosef go to Chevron Yeshiva, they go to all the... when they had the Machlokes of the Heter Mechira, so the Yeshuas Malkai, so he was one of the supporters of the Heter Mechira. So he says, even though the Ashkenazi Poskim are opposed to the Heter Mechira, he says, but the Sephardi Poskim support the Heter Mechira, and the Ashkenazi Poskim are like Klipas Hashum, they're like the peel of a garlic compared to the Sephardi Poskim. The Sephardi Poskim are much greater than the Ashkenazi ones. Okay? Anyway, so this is a Shver Rambam. This is a Shver Rambam, a very difficult Rambam. So Isaac b'Talmud Torah, if somebody was busy learning Torah and the time for Kriya Shema comes, so you have to stop learning Torah in order to read Kriya Shema. And if you're Isaac b'Tzorchei Rabbim, you would say Klal Mensch, somebody who's involved in the Klal, I don't know, Rav Moshe Sherer, right? He was a Klal Mensch, he was always Isaac in Tzorchei Tzibur. So again, you don't interrupt to say Kriya Shema. The Yigmar is Kehen. You finish dealing with the klal for the tzarchei tzibur, and then you say Kriya Shema if there's time. Right, so therefore, being Isaac in tzarchei rabbim, to be Isaac in the klal to help the tzibur, gives you a greater dispensation than if you were learning Torah. Because if you were learning Torah, you would have to interrupt to say Kriya Shema. But if you're being Isaac in tzarchei rabbim, you don't have to interrupt to say Kriya Shema. Okay, and that's the psak of the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Ayin. If somebody's busy with Tzarchei Rabbim, comes time for Kriya Shema, don't interrupt your Tzarchei Rabbim, do what you need to do, okay?
Serving in the army, you call it Tzarchei Rabbim?
It's even more than Tzarchei Rabbim because serving in the army is Pekuach Nefesh. Okay, so serving in the army is even more than Tzarchei Rabbim. But let's say if Moshe Sherer is meeting with a congressman, a senator, or whatever, he's busy helping the Klal, so he doesn't have to stop to say Kriya Shema. He can skip mincha, he can skip Kriya Shema, he doesn't have to. Oh, so that was the shir we said there's no tefillas tashlumin, that was the previous shir. That's right. He saved them. I guess he had a break in the fighting, so he was able to daven mincha. Yeah, but they had a break. He had a break. Baruch Hashem. So number 22, the Lacha Mishnah says, if you're Isaac in Tzarchei Rabbim, it's a din of Isaac b'mitzvah pater min a mitzvah. If you're Isaac in a mitzvah, you're pater from Kriya Shema. Very straightforward. Number 23 in the reference sheet, that Teres Tzvi in Siman Ayin says the same thing. Why? Because it comes from the regular rule of Demisha Isaac b'mitzvah pater min a mitzvah. Okay? Number 24. Okay? This is the Rambam in Hilchos Tefillah, Perek Vav Halacha Ches. Misha Isaac betalmud Torah v'giaz mana tefillah poisik u'mispalel. You also have to interrupt your Torah learning in order to daven. If let's say that's the only thing you do, you don't do anything else other than learn Torah. Ve'ein oisik melcha klal, v'yoisik b'Torah b'shas tefillah, eina poisik. So you don't have to daven. If you're such a masmid and you only learn Torah, you don't have to stop to daven. The Gemara says that Rabbi Shema only davened once a year. Rabbi Huda Nasi only davened once in 30 days because they were Torah Nasi. They didn't do anything else other than learn Torah, so they didn't have to daven. Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, the Sridei Eish, once skipped mincha. He didn't daven mincha. He was so involved in his learning that he didn't daven mincha. There's a few versions of the story. One version of the story is that he forgot to daven mincha. Another version of the story says, I'm so busy learning Torah, he couldn't pull himself away from the Gemara to daven mincha. So the altar of Salbatka found out that Rav Yechiel Weinberg skipped mincha. He called him over. And Rav Yaakov Yechiel Weinberg was very embarrassed. He didn't want to admit that he skipped mincha. Okay? So he got a telling off from the altar of Salabatka not to be dishonest. He says, I know you didn't daven mincha, right? And he was told off for skipping mincha. Yeah? Chashka b'Torah, Ben Azai. Ben Azai said, Nafshi chashka b'Torah. I remember when I got married, I wrote a kuntris all about the halachas of Oisik b'mitzvah patim and a mitzvah and a chasen and whatever have you. So I brought over there that all the achrayim ask, they don't understand. Ben Azai didn't get married because he says, Nafshi chashka b'Torah. I'm too devoted to my Torah learning. I can't get married and have kids. So the Mefarshim ask, what, he didn't take a lulav and an esrog? You didn't blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. What's this business? There's a mitzvah of pruruvu. You have to have a son and a daughter. How could Ben Azai get out of that mitzvah? So I brought a few answers and I shlugged up all the answers. If Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg gives an answer, I shlugged up the answer and I went through the different answers and I said, I don't have a yishuv. So I remember somebody stopped me in the street in Antwerp. He said, I saw your kuntris. And he said, the reason why Ben Azai couldn't get married, when he said nafshi chashka b'Torah, he couldn't get himself aroused, he couldn't have relations with his wife. He was physically incapable of having relations with his wife. That's what he meant. Nafshi chashka b'Torah, I'm so addicted to the Torah, I can't get my mind off of the Torah. When you have relations with a woman, you have to get your mind off the Torah for a bit. Right? You have to go out with your wife, you have to go to the restaurant, you have to have cake with her, Getting a person who's too much of a masmid, he can't have a relation. I was always wondering, the Rogachover only had one daughter. I have no idea why the Rogachover only had one daughter, but I always wondered, the Rogachover was a genius. People, the way he described it, he was so immersed in learning, they couldn't get him to think about anything else. So maybe that's why he only had one child, because maybe he couldn't get himself, maybe he didn't know how to connect with his wife. I don't know. Yeah?
Maybe not only,
that's
exactly
very bizarre stuff. I know there's one Hasidus that all the very wacky stuff. I wouldn't get anywhere near that stuff. So anyways, so the Rambam says that if you're learning Torah, you don't have to daven, and that's the Ikar HALACHA. If somebody's Torah Umnasa, all he does is learn Torah, he doesn't have to stop to daven. If you're being Oisik in Tzarchei Tzibur, it's like being Oisik in Divrei Torah. Okay?
They're stopping to eat. They're stopping to do other things.
Very good. So how can they stop? Very good. So there's a Ran in Perek Layachbar, in the second Perek of Brachas, that the Ran says that if you take care of your bodily needs to enable yourself to continue doing the mitzvah, it's also part and parcel of the mitzvah. He says, for example, the Gemara there says that the grave diggers, they're digging the graves in order to bury the deceased. So he says they definitely have to stop and rest, because you can't be digging all the time. You need to stop and rest. So he says even when they're resting, they still have a betur from Krishma, because they're also Eisik b'mitzvah. They're also doing a mitzvah. So if somebody learns Torah and he stops to eat or he stops to refresh, to get some fresh air, he's still considered being Eisik b'mitzvah even when he takes the break. So therefore, yeah. You mean if you're an onain and somebody has an organization?
you're
Yeah.
When you're taking the
Yeah.
base to Eretz Yisrael, for example,
Yeah.
once the base is in the hold of the plane, you are not metapel with the base anymore.
So
Technically,
you're not an onain. I know. There's a shita. It's a hard sugya. There's a Rabbi Yosef Lieberman, the Mishnas Yosef. I saw a tshuva he wrote. And he says, when you're on the plane flying your deceased parent, for example, you want to bury a deceased relative, one wants to bury a deceased relative in Eretz Yisrael, and the body is in the belly of the plane, he says that you don't have a din of an oning then, because there's nothing that you can do.
But really, typically, we're not knowing that.
No, the Paiskim are not like Rav Yosef Lieberman. People, I don't know, has anybody here ever flown a deceased relative? So you probably got the psak not to make brachas even when you're on the plane. Not like Rav Yosef Lieberman, till after the kfura. And the reason is because there's still things you can do on the plane. You're still thinking about it. You know that when you arrive in Eretz Yisrael, there's things you want to take care of.
You're not transferring body, but you're not dealing mamish with...
Yeah, but the minute you give the body over to the Chaver Kadisha, you're done.
You're done. That's what the Yerushalmi says. The Yerushalmi says that when you give the body to the Chaver Kadisha, then it's all over.
That's true in all of
That's correct.
nowadays.
That's right.
It's all right,
But we
then-
still
no,
don't.
But
the
no,
Oinen
but you're
still
not, but you
stays,
It stays an island, right.
state of
before
unease.
the,
Right.
before the funeral, you do mitzvahs.
No, we don't.
We don't.
We don't.
We don't. But I think with the Tfilas Haderech, who asked the question about Tfilas Haderech? Was your question? Yes, question. Does an owner make a Tfilas Haderech? So as I mentioned, half the kitzos for him say yes, half the kitzos for him say no. So I think you should say it, but without the chasima of Baruch Atah Hashem Shema Tefillah. I think that seems to be the most reasonable position, because even though you're an ayin, you want Hashem to protect you. You want Hashem to give you the siyata d'shmai to get safely to your destination. That's one still needs, even if he's an onin. But the last section of you say Baruch Atah Hashem Shema Tefillah, that's like all other brachas. That's I think the one. Sharadek, exactly. So this is the Shver Rambam. The Rambam says that if you're oisik b'tzarchei rabim, you're being oisik b'tzarchei tzibur. The difficulty is we saw that it's like being oisik b'Torah, sorry. So if you're being oisik b'tzarchei tzibur, that's like learning Torah. A person who's a klal mensch, who's dealing with the tzibur to help the public, he's like somebody who's learning Torah. He's as good as an avrech. He's maybe even better than an avrech, right? He still also has to learn. So he's like being oisik in divrei Torah. So the Beis Yosef, number 25, says that that comes from the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says that oisik b'tzarchei tzibur is like being osik in Torah. Helping the tzibur is like learning Torah. Okay, so he says the Rambam seems to learn that the nafkamina is that you don't have to stop your tzarchei tzibur in order to read Kriyat Shema. Okay? Yeah.
Has the same halacha as we who Torah Nasa.
Torah Nasa, exactly.
So he's a level higher.
He's a level higher. Now the difficulty is that even if it's Torah Nasa, the Gemara in Shabbos Yud Aleph says that you have to interrupt for Kriyat Shema. So why is the Rambam saying that if you're being oisik b'tzarchei tzibur, you're helping the public, you're on the same footing as somebody who's learning Torah? It's not true. You're not on the same footing as somebody who's learning Torah. You're a step above somebody who's learning Torah. Because if you were learning Torah, you don't have to daven if it's Torah Munasa, but you still have to say Kriyat Shema. If you're being oisik b'tzarchei tzibur, even better than somebody who's Torah Munasa, you don't even have to interrupt for Kriyat Shema. So you're not helping. You're not saying, "Wow, if you're being oisik b'tzarchei tzibur, you're amazing. You're on the same level. You're on the same footing as somebody who learns Torah." It's not true. You're a level above somebody who's learning Torah. You don't even have to stop to say Kriyat Shema.
Against the Berkat HaShachar. It says that the Talmud Torah can make it kulam.
So Torah Mekanek Kulam, very good. That you can add that question. The Chara, we say every morning that Talmud Torah is Keneged Kulam. It's not Keneged Kulam. If you're learning Torah, you have to stop to say Kriyat Shema. If I'm being oiz, it brings Lidei Maisa.
But Kriyat Shema is a chelik of his learning Torah.
Very good. Very good. There's Yerushalmi like that. Very good. We'll get to that. So this is the difficulty of all the Achrayim. This is what makes it a Shver Rambam. Number 27, the Lechem Mishnah says, I don't understand the Divrei Yosef. He says, Tzarchei tzibur adif mi Talmud Torah. Being oisik in the tzibur is even more than Talmud Torah. Number 27. Number 28, the Eilas Tamid has the same question. Right? Number 29, the Pri Chadash has the same question. Right? Look at the second.
The Prime Minister of Israel, for example,
would never have a chiyuv to daven.
a chiyuv to daven.
That's right. The Prime Minister of Israel, who's dealing all the time with tzarchei tzibur, wouldn't have to daven. He wouldn't have to daven. He wouldn't have to even say Kriya Shema because he's oisik b'tzarchei tzibur. Absolutely correct.
He's also,
Very good. He's machar.
he's feeling,
Very-
Prime Minister is feeling,
It's pikuach nefesh. It's even more than pikuach. So even if it wasn't pikuach nefesh, even if you're somebody who's, let's say, a member of the municipality who's helping people, I don't know what to deal with their arnona or whatever else. If you're being oisik b'tzarchei tzibur, you don't have to daven. You don't have to do anything.
All the generals are 24/7.
Generals don't have to daven. They don't have to say Kriya Shema. I think if you're in the IDF,
We're talking about a chayal
yeah,
who's action. And
Right.
he wants
He
to
has
have
to turn around, he has to turn
If he
around.
wants to have a mincha in the middle of a
Mhm.
battle, I can understand. You don't put mincha on the side.
right.
If you're a general, and you're going by helicopter to the meeting.
running away.
If you're an IDF general, you probably never have to daven. You probably have to have it. And there's even a chiddush what you mentioned before. The Ran says that when you rest, if the resting is necessary in order to enable you to continue doing your work, so even if he goes to rest to recharge his batteries, even then he doesn't have to daven because that's part of the mitzvah, perhaps.
See, when I'm learning, I'm a yochid. When I'm
Yeah.
also with rabbin, it's the rabbin. So that maybe it's
Maybe that's why it's Isaac Barabim. Yeah.
I'm a yochid.
That's
I'm
right.
learning all this.
The Pa'as Shulchan says in his Hakdama that the Gra learned the sciences. He got the secular textbooks and he studied the textbooks that were available to him. Somebody said that his level of mathematics was he was very advanced.
they found notes of the Graz.
Yeah,
He proves
Once theorem.
right.
Kramer's theorem. Well, I once looked into it. Kramer's theorem is not the Gra, but maybe the Gra supported Kramer's theorem. I don't know.
They claim that they found notes in.
You know, so somebody said he saw it. He said it's 10th or 11th grade mathematics, which was excellent for his time, right? For somebody in his time, 250 years ago, to already have achieved the mathematics of, let's say, 11th grade high school mathematics is very, very good.
A neighbor of ours,
Yeah.
Lubotsky, I don't know if
Yeah.
anybody knows the name, he's a
Mhm.
professor, I think, of mathematics.
Yeah.
And on the north side of the Gra, he's a descendant.
Oh, he's a descendant of the Gra.
And
He discusses the Gra's mathematics. Of his ancestor.
About the mathematics.
Right. So the Pa'as Shulchan says that he's studied algebra and all he says he studied science but he said that the only thing he didn't study was pharmaceuticals because his father didn't let him. The father said if you study pharmaceuticals, if you become a pharmacist, you're going to be busy writing out prescriptions for people all the time and therefore you won't have time to learn Torah. I heard from Rabbi Elisha Birnbaum from the Rabbanud. He said that he heard from somebody who went to Rav Moshe, a Talmud of Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe said, don't become a doctor. If you become a doctor, you'll never be able to learn Torah. You'll have a batur from learning Torah. You don't have to learn Torah if you're a doctor and you're helping people all the time. But it's not a great position to be in where you never get to enjoy a blood Gemara. Somebody came to Rav Aaron Kotler, the Rosh Hashiva of Lakewood. He said, the Yisachar and the Zvulun are the same. Right? Rashi says we mentioned Zvulun before Yisachar because we want to convey that Zvulun has the same reward as Yisachar. So why should I be Yisachar? I should be a Zvulun. He says, you're right, your Olam Haba will be the same, but what about the Olam Hazeh? To enjoy a good shir, to enjoy a good Rambam. He says, that's what you want to be, to enjoy a Shver Rambam. So the Pri Chadash has the same difficulty. He says, the way the Beis Yosef understood the Rambam, understood the Yerushalmi, we were trying to illustrate, we're trying to put Tzarchei Rabbim on a pedestal by saying it's the same thing as learning Torah. It's not. It's even more than learning Torah. The Gra, let's just read the Gra together, number 30 on the reference sheet. Divrei Beis Yosef Tmuim, Dagama Oisik B'divrei Torah Chayav B'Kriya Shema, Afilu Rashbi V'Chaveirav. Even Rashbi didn't daven, but he said Kriya Shema. Right?
You see in the Haggadah, the Rebbe is man Kriya Shema.
He gives man Kriya Shema. They were learning all night, but they had to stop and say Kriya Shema. So we saw last week, number 31 on the reference sheet, we saw a very difficult Rabbeinu Menayach. Rabbeinu Menayach says that Kala Oisik B'Tzarchei Rabbim, Shem Haya Tzarchei Tzibur Mutalim Alav Ve'en La Eisa Gachar. That's all he is. He's a klal mensch. We're not talking about somebody who helps people out once in a while. We're talking about somebody like Rav Moshe Scherer, who that's what he did. He devotes everything that he does. He devotes himself entirely for the klal. So he has a betur. Okay, shaharehu kimishe tarasai umnasai. It's like Torah umnasai.
But that's for tefillah. It doesn't-
That's for tefillah. Very good. Exactly. It doesn't answer Krishma. So, yeah.
The one time I heard of Rabbi Yosef, the regular interpretation of that is you start asking questions and shilas to your Rebbe, can I do this, do that?
Right.
And Obadiah.
Yeah, it has an afkamita, by the way.
The,
Shailim v'darshim shleishim mem. 30 days before Pesach, you start to give halachas of Pesach. The nafkamina is that if you fly away, you're going to be going to Miami for Pesach. So if you fly to Miami within 30 days of Pesach, you have to check the house for bedikas chametz. You need to do a bedikas chametz. If you fly to Miami more than 30 days before Pesach, you don't need to do a bedikas chametz. Right? The nafkamina. Right? But one of the B'shainim say the nafkamin is that if you get two questions from Talmidim, and one is asking about Hilchos Pesach, if it's within 30 days of Pesach, you have to first answer the Talmud who asked the question about Hilchos Pesach, and then you answer the other Talmud.
You also force the Rabbi to learn.
You can force the Rabbi to learn
Force
the...
Rabbi learn. He's learning. No,
You got to learn the Inyan Diyama.
You can ask the question, not
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
who's also in Tzarchid Tzibur,
Yeah.
is he allowed to take time on to that?
No, he's not even allowed to because that's what I'm saying. You're right. He's not even allowed to because that's what we saw in the Ritva. The Ritva says that if you're already preoccupied with mitzvah A, you're not even allowed to stop mitzvah A to do mitzvah B. Mitzvah A is now mandatory and mitzvah B is now not even considered a mitzvah. That's what we saw from the Ritva. Okay?
So it's hutra as opposed to the...
That's our hutra, that's right. The Ritva learns that when you have a din of oisik with mitzvah, potim in a mitzvah, the second mitzvah is hutra, which means it becomes like a non-mitzvah. Okay? So we really need to understand this Rabbeinu Munayach. Rabbeinu Munayach says that if you want an exemption from mitzvahs, you have to be oisik b'tzarchei tzibur, like as if you don't do anything else, you gave your life to being oisik b'tzarchei tzibur, and then it becomes like TORAH umnasai. Just like when you TORAH umnasai, you have a betur from tefillah, so too when you do nothing else other than devote yourself to the tzibur, so then you have a betur of oisik b'mitzvah. Now this is very difficult. The Gemara in Sukkah, Daf Chavav, number 32 in the reference sheet, says that if you're doing a mitzvah, you don't have to do sukkah. So why should tzarchei tzibur have to be on the level where you don't do anything else other than tzarchei tzibur? I mean, we don't find that with other mitzvahs. If you're doing mitzvah, you don't have to do mitzvah B. Where do you ever find this idea that you have to be doing nothing else other than this mitzvah? This is your life's project.
Relative to tefillah.
Oh, and it's only relative to tefillah. It only gives you patur from tefillah. It doesn't give you patur from Kriyat. So the Gemara in Moed Katan says that Torah is afilu chetze shemayim leyishvu ba. Torah is the greatest mitzvah. Okay, of all the mitzvahs, Torah is the greatest mitzvah. That's what we say every day. Talmud Torah kan eget kulam. The mitzvah of learning Torah is greater than other mitzvahs, and therefore the Gemara concludes the last line over there. The Gemara in Moed Katan Davav, that if it's a mitzvah she'ef shalasas aydei chayrim, somebody else can do the mitzvah for you. Don't interrupt your Torah learning. But if it's a mitzvah she'ef shalasas aydei chayrim, nobody else can do the mitzvah. You close the Gemara and you go do the mitzvah. I remember when I was in yeshiva, there was a boy who said he went to the mashkiach and he said, "Should I stop learning to go to my grandfather's kever? It'll make my father very happy if I go to my father's kever to visit, to show respect to his father. Should I go? Should I stop my learning? I'm learning Torah. Maybe I shouldn't stop." So the mashkiach says, "I'm not sure." It was kind of back and forth, and I was thinking to myself, of course you should go. Right? There's a halacha, the mitzvah she'ef shalasas aydei chayrim. If there's a mitzvah that nobody else can do, the mitzvah of kibbutz, nobody else can do the kibbutz might be different, because who
wasn't punished because
right? Because he was learning Torah.
learning was part from kibbutz.
Right.
So learning parts is you from kibbutz.
Learning, you know why? Because your father also has a chiyuv to do mitzvahs. Kulchem chayav b'chvaydi. If your father says, "I want you to stop doing a mitzvah so that you can give me a drink of water," well, your father also has an obligation to enable you to do the mitzvah. Right? So maybe the mashkech did have a reason to be mistapik. But the halacha is that if you have a mitzvah that nobody else could do, you have to close the Gemara and you have to do the mitzvah. You don't continue learning when there's a mitzvah that nobody else could do. Now, this is number 34 in the reference sheet, the Rabbeinu Shlomo ben Hayatom. It's an interesting name. Rabbeinu Shlomo, the son of the orphan. Well, maybe his father was an orphan, I don't know.
So it would appear.
So it would appear, exactly. But it's funny how his father was apparently identified as the orphan. Okay, so let's just read that together. Let's say you have a mitzvah that has a time constraint. Vizu eine mitzvah veres kogain musaf mincha. Okay, let's say you have musaf mincha. According to Rabbi Yehuda, musaf can only be davened until 7.5 hours into the day. Mincha, you have the whole day for mincha. Chiyotze behem. So yasa oitzai veres koidim sheavdena. So stop doing mitzvah A, go to mitzvah B because mitzvah B has a time constraint. If you don't get to mitzvah B, you're going to miss it completely. You go back to the mitzvah that has more time. Talmud Torah is considered a mitzvah that doesn't have a time constraint. You're busy with the Taisvis, so you won't learn the Taisvis now. You have tomorrow to learn the Taisvis. Okay? Now, by the way, this is a chidush. I ask people, nobody looks at Torah this way. Everybody learns, Torah is endless, right? Versus
It's more important than
Yama Talmud.
Shabbat.
So people tend to think that the Torah has a real time constraint. Well, you don't have to know the entire Torah. Hashem Yisbarach doesn't expect somebody to know the entire Torah. It's impossible.
I mean, the mitzvah is the Gisa bar.
V'gisa b'yamim v'layla.
But the amount that you actually absorb.
That's not. Each person absorbs as much as he can. Somebody does a mitzvah of shinantam, sheishnunam bificha, that you should know the halachas. If somebody asks you a question, you should be able to answer the question. But it's le'la hamlacha ligmar. You'll never be able to learn the entire Torah. You learn as much as you can. I remember when I grew up, we had this impression that the great poskim of Moshe Feinstein, they knew the entire Torah. It's not true. Right? They didn't know the entire Torah. The things that they had to answer, the questions that came up frequently, the major poskim of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, they knew the answers, but there were always areas in Torah that they didn't know everything. Nobody knows everything. Yeah, they didn't know everything. Exactly. I remember it reminds me of the Radvaz. The Radvaz, very impressive. I told this maybe 10 times here. He has over 10,000 shuvas. Okay, that's a lot. If he was writing chuvas for 40 years, that's a few chuvas a day. It's very impressive. So when they had the big debate about the smicha, that in Tzfat, the Mabri Beirav wanted to renew the smicha, so the Mar Halbach in Yerushalayim objected very strongly. He says you have no right to renew the smicha because you need to have the consensus of all the Chachmei Yisrael, and you renewed the smicha without having consulted with us, so therefore you can't renew the smicha. So they had this big fight. It became very nasty. Okay, it really got very personal. The Maralbach has an entire kuntris, right, about his back and forth with the Mahari Beirav. So they said, let's send it to the Radvaz. The Radvaz is the Reish HaVeizin in Egypt. I think it was in Alexandria. So let's see what he has to say. So the Radvaz wrote a tshuva and he sided with the Maralbach. He sided with the Rav in Yerushalayim that says that you can't renew the smicha. And he says, because the Rambam says in order to have smicha, you have to be able to paskin b'chol Torah kula. Anywhere they ask you a question, halacha, you have to be able to paskin. The Radvaz says there's nobody in this generation that's at that level. Nobody is in that level where they could answer a halacha in every single area of Torah scholarship, of halacha at least.
After Moshe Rabbeinu was, we know that after Moshe Rabbeinu was nifted,
they lost halachas. Well, the Gemara says, what's the Talmud Chacham that you can be memana as a mafarnes, that you can appoint him as a leader over the community, that he knows how to answer in every area of halacha. And apparently there must have been, even in Mesachas Kala, that's right, even Mesachas Kala. So there must have been scholars in the past that were able to answer in every area of halacha. But again, I'm sure even such a scholar, new shailas would have come up that he said, I have to look into it. The Gemara has many teikus. So you can't know the entire Torah. Nobody knows the entire Torah. Even if you know how to paskin in every area of halacha, nobody can know the entire Torah. So therefore, your chiyuv is to learn as much as you have available. I mean, in Siman Mem Zayin, you know why you don't have to say Birchas HaTorah every time you go back to learn? When the Rabbeinu Tam was asked, Taisis and Brachas Yud Aleph, the Ri asked his uncle Rabbeinu Tam, he says, when you come back to the sukkah, you have to make another bracha on the sukkah. How come when you get back to learning Torah, why don't you have to make another bracha on learning Torah? So he says, because your whole day, you're always thinking about when am I going to be able to get back? Some say because we have to live your life according to Torah, so often you have to think about what the halacha tells you. Can I do this? Can I do that? And also, a person is waiting, is looking forward to when he can get back to learning Gemara, when he can get back to learning. So therefore, you never really get completely distracted from the Torah. But the sukkah is a hesach hadas. When you go to work, you forget about the sukkah. So when you come back, you have to make another bracha. It's interesting that the Rosh was asked by his son. He says, do I have to make a Birchas HaTorah every time I come back to learning? He says, no, because you never really get distracted. He says, if you're a Talmud Chacham that's always learning Torah. So the Magen Avram in Siman Mem Zayin Sif Yud says, what if it's not a Talmud Chacham who's always learning Torah? Some people like to go to the cafe, they like to get involved in recreation, they're not busy with the Torah.
When he makes a bracha, he mentions.
So they say the bathroom, the Agur says there's no interruption, because when a person goes to the bathroom, there are halachas that have to be observed in the bathroom.
And he says Aschi Yotzar.
Yes, Aschi Yotzar. There were some Rishonim that did say Birchas HaTorah when they came out of the bathroom. The Marami Rudenberg says he didn't make a bracha when he came out of the bathroom. He didn't make another bracha of Birchas HaTorah because he was always waiting to get back to learning. So the Magen Avram says, yeah, if you're not a Talmud Chacham who's always hoping and thinking about when will I be able to get back to learning Torah, you have to make another Birchas HaTorah. The Taz says no. The Taz says the fact that you're always obligated to learn Torah, that means you never disconnect from the Torah, therefore nobody has to make another Birchas HaTorah. The meaning is, you see, like the Taz. And every Sibli, let's say somebody wants to watch a film with his wife. So he goes and he watches a film with his wife. You ever seen anybody who makes another bracha of Birchas HaTorah when he finishes the film? Shalom Bayis. Let's say he didn't watch the film with his wife, he watched the film with a friend. Okay, Marbim Shalom Ba'ilam.
As long as you wear kippahs from God,
okay. So the Sefer Hashlama says the same thing. Mitzvah she'enei averes, afa pisha acheres, efshar lasas adecherem yochol levatla. Okay. If it's a mitzvah she'enei averes, the mitzvah can wait. Right? The mitzvah is not running away. Okay, so even though somebody else can do it, okay, you can interrupt mitzvah A if you're involved in mitzvah A, but mitzvah A is not running around. So you can stop doing A and go do mitzvah B, even though mitzvah B could be done by somebody else. Okay, mitzvah A is not running away. Let's give an example. Al tachmitzana, but mitzvah A is not running away. Let's say, I'm trying to think of an example. What?
Other people can learn Torah for you also, no?
It's a mitzvah shebegufay. It's a mitzvah shebegufay. Yisachar Zvulun, okay, that's a mitzvah. Yeah, I can't really do that unless Kupat Eir they already pay the Rabbanim. they daven for you. I never understood him. Rosh Yeshiva doesn't like the whole ad campaign about people davening for you. You can daven for yourself too, right? You don't have to pay somebody to daven. It becomes a big business over there. But my Rosh Yeshiva gets very upset about it. It bothers him a lot. It bothers me too. It bothers him tremendously. Rav Matisyahu Solomon was so upset about it. He came to complain to Rav Chaim Kanevsky about it. He says, you're making a mockery. It's becoming a joke. Paying people to give tzedakah. I'm very in favor of giving tzedakah. So I remember they asked him, I once made a donation, he says, do you want the rabbi to daven for you because you made a donation? So I said, no, I want the tzedakah to be l'shem Shema. I gave the tzedakah not because I wanted somebody to daven for me. Now, the Maisa, you want to be Melamed Zchus. Unfortunately, people don't have that spiritual maturity and people buy into the whole thing. So it gets more donations and you can help more poor people. Okay, but if you really want to have spiritual maturity, don't give tzedakah because somebody's going to daven for you. Daven for yourself. It's better to daven for yourself than to have somebody daven for you.
If they're so good with the tefillahs and they need money, so you want to solve my problems, you need money.
You need money. You should, with all your miracle workings, you can't raise money.
The truth is, I
He gave a bracha. He gave a
I went to
bracha.
see Reb Chaim twice. I know you did.
He gave a
He gave a
bracha.
bracha.
He gave a bracha.
In fact, at the end, it was
No, but the truth is, the Gemara does say that if somebody has a chayil in his house, the Gemara says if somebody has somebody's ill in the house, you go ask somebody to daven for you. There's nothing wrong with asking somebody to daven for you, especially the Yamim Neiroim. Some people are the chazan. People come over, I have, my wife isn't well, Leilenu, please have her in mind. When you daven, that's fine. You can ask the chazan who's davening at the Yamim to have him. There's nothing wrong with asking somebody to daven for you. But to make the whole tzedakah contingent on somebody davening for you, it's distasteful. It's not. It's selling it exactly. It makes it. It's not so batam.
You mentioned a mitzvah rabbanon. If I'm in mitzvah rabbanon, I'm also in mitzvah rabbanon. I'm part from mitzvah d'oraisa.
According to Rabbi Avram ben Ahar.
Where does the mocker and the pasuk?
So it's a good question. It's really Rabbeinu Avram ben Ahar, Rabbeinu Avram ben Ahar in Sukkot Daf Chavav. He says that even if you're doing a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, you get an exemption from doing a mitzvah d'Oraisa. The question is, what's the makar? So b'stam, because the Gemara in Shabbos says that every time you do a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, you're also fulfilling a mitzvah d'Oraisa because of loisasur, shalavicha. It's a machagis. So we said that maybe.
The Ramban would not hold it.
Very good. So we wanted to say last week, based on what you said, that maybe maybe it depends on that. It's totally the machagis. If every d'Rabbanan is a d'Oraisa, then you're doing a d'Rabbanan. You don't have to do a d'Oraisa. It's a d'Rabbanan. Yeah. Rabbi Yehuda Asad, the Yehuda Yala, he holds that if you're being Isaac in a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, you don't have a tour from a mitzvah d'Oraisa. Although most poskim hold that actually you do have a Patur. The Aruch LaNer is mistapek. The Aruch LaNer is not sure. Okay? So the Sefer HaShlama says, let's say I'm doing mitzvah. Mitzvah A can wait. Okay? Let's say blowing shofar. Right? I have many hours to blow shofar. Yeah, you have until the sunset to blow shofar, so blowing shofar could wait. And then you have somebody who's not feeling well. He needs a glass of water. He's not feeling well. So according to the Sefer Shlama, blowing shofar could wait. Stop. Don't blow shofar. Go and give the person a glass of water because right now he's thirsty. It can't wait. The shofar could wait. He needs water now. He can't wait. So you stop doing the mitzvah that could wait to deal with a mitzvah that's more urgent. Now he says, according to the rules, Talmud Torah could always wait. Right? Just like Rabbi Shlomo ben Hayasim said, the Sefer Shlomo says, the Torah is ein averos, Torah could wait. So normally I should stop learning Torah for every mitzvah. I should always stop my Torah learning. But since Torah is such a precious mitzvah, so the Chachamim said that if somebody else could do the mitzvah, if somebody else could give the glass of water, continue learning Torah. If somebody is available to give a glass of water, then you continue learning Torah. If nobody else is available to give a glass of water to the person who's thirsty, then close the Gemara and give the person a glass of water. That's also the shita of the Talmud Rabbeinu Yechiel Paris. I put it in bold, number 36. Torah apal she'ein shteim oivros. Torah also belongs to the mitzvah, to the category of non-urgent mitzvahs. You learn when you have time, but Torah is not considered a mitzvah veris.
My grandfather was very orthodox, had a brother who saved lives.
You can, because if you'll do a better job, then yeah.
Even though the whole day you may be involved, you won't be able to do other mitzvahs that you're supposed to do in Shabbos.
So if you can do a better job as an ambulance driver, you become an ambulance driver. The Gemara says that you mechal Shabbos al gedei gedolei Yisrael. Gedolei Yisrael, according to Moshe Chaim, doesn't mean Rav Chaim Kanievsky, Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Soloveitchik. Gedolei Yisrael means adults that are Jewish. Don't give the job to a goy, or don't give the job to a child. Right? If you have an opportunity to save lives, take it for yourself, because you'll make sure to do it better. You'll make sure to do a very good job. Okay? So the Ritva says the same thing. The Ritva Megillah, number 37. The Talmud Torah efshar l'machar. Talmud Torah could be done tomorrow. Okay? So this is a new way of looking at Talmud Torah. You ask most laimdim, ask most people, is Torah mitzvah averes or mitzvah she'ein averes? Is Torah a mitzvah that could wait, or is Torah a mitzvah that can't wait? So we've seen all these Rishonim that say Torah is a mitzvah that could wait. Torah is a mitzvah she'ein averes. If you can't learn the Tosfos now, you learn the Tosfos tomorrow. It's not a mitzvah that's considered an urgent mitzvah. It's not something that it's not a mitzvah that has a time constraint.
Wouldn't this also be part of the idea that Haredim need guys to the army, that right now the army needs X amount?
Yeah, so the Haredim have to, I gave a share on this. The Haredim say we don't go to the army because we're learning Torah, but that's not the right answer. It's not true. Right? There's no patur from going to Mechamis mitzvah. There's no patur. So they say, they quote the mitzvah of Elef Lamata, that when they used to go to war, you had 1,000 people learning Torah, and then you had 1,000 people fighting, and there is even a medrash, Ayulkat Shemaini, that seems to say that they used to match them up. It's true, but that's not by a Mechamis mitzvah. Mechamis mitzvah, everybody needs to go out to war. Right? So therefore, I discourage the Charedim. I hold that they shouldn't be saying that. They shouldn't tell the public that we don't go to the army because we're learning Torah. That's not what they should be saying. The reason was because when the state was founded, the Haredim felt very threatened by secular Zionism because they saw Ben Gurion didn't want them in the army. Well, that's one of the machlokes. Yeah, Ben Gurion didn't want the religionists to infiltrate the army. He wanted a secular army. He didn't want a religious army. So the reason is because the Chazon Ish and the Rav of Brisk, they said, oh, look what happened in Volozhin. In Volozhin, half the Volozhin yeshiva left and became totally secular. In Lithuanian communities, some places, you had 80% of them becoming completely secular because of the sorry? Ishvarat Sanayid, because of the Haskalah. So a lot of the ideological heirs of the Haskalah were also the founders of the state. Many of the founders of the state were also members of the Haskalah. So they said if the Haskalah did what they did in Europe without without the infrastructure of a state, now that they have the infrastructure of a state, it's going to be 10 times worse. So I even have a sefer at home, quotes from the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish said he doesn't believe there are going to be, he's not sure if there's going to be religious Jews 10 years after the founding of the state. That's what his prediction was. He says there was even a story there. The Chazon Ish was going to the matzah baker, and he says the state was founded already 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and Baruch Hashem, we're still baking matzahs. I wasn't sure if we're going to still be able. And it made sense. They saw what the Haskalah did in Europe. I don't know what the assimilation rate went. They got as high as 80% in places like Germany. In the States. And so they said that what we need to do is we need to isolate. We totally need to insulate. We need to go into the ghettos. We have to have nothing to do with secular culture. No, you're not going to the universities, no going to the army. That's why they don't go to the army, not because they're learning Torah. If the only reason is they're learning Torah, you have to close the Gemara and you have to go fight because of the Muhammad Smith. That's the real reason. That's why I don't think it's a good idea for them to say we don't learn.
In 1973 in Sukkot,
Yeah.
Shaya Dari, who was an Israeli in the army, etc.
Right.
It's very interesting, and they didn't agree.
They didn't agree.
Shaya Dari said, we have to come.
We have to give less time for learning and more time for the tzavah.
Lichtenstein said
You can't take away from the learning Torah. So the truth is, the Gedolim were, they were they adopted this policy of isolationism. Isolationism politically means you don't get involved in other wars, but another type of isolationism. So they said, let's rebuild the yeshiva system that was destroyed in Europe, and they were very successful. Thousands of yeshivas. They thought the state would spell the end of, and it was just the opposite. The state gives the most money to Torah learning, and the kollel have flourished in the state of Israel, and the religion in general, Judaism, has flourished in the state of Israel more so than in any previous time.
Enormous impact on America.
An enormous impact
So many of the boys that come from America here
are Marbitz Torah in America. They go back. Very well point. A lot of the Olam HaTorah in America is as a result. So the center of Torah is right here in Eretz Yisrael, under the state of Israel. So they were very big. They built up the Olam HaTorah gloriously. They built up a huge Olam HaTorah. So now maybe it's time it's a little bit of a hot potato, and I'm getting into. But it's time now, I think, that we should start setting up units in the army where they learn and they go to the mikvah if they want to. And with Yer Shemayim, they can get the best hashkacha. I think that's what we need to do. I think we need to start. We need to make Haredi units in the army. It's going to take time, but I think that's what. Other rabbi, the boys, they should give them the best hashkachas there, and if they're worried about having contact with girls or whatever, they don't want to have to think. So make it sanua, make it, and it take a bit of time. But I think that's a good thing, in my humble opinion. Everybody's going to disagree. Yeah. Vehicle. Yeah, there.
Some kind of Hesder program that would be more Haredi.
Yeah. So Aaron Leib Steinman supported it, and Rav Nissim Karelitz supported it, but they got a lot of backlash. The more Rav Shmuel Auerbach held that they're opening up the gates. They're opening up. I can't remember. They need people. I remember I had a friend. What was his name? He was a genius. He was a very high IQ. So they were really after him. They wanted him in high tech. The army they want the big brains. So they kept on calling him all the time. They said, "Come." He was a very brilliant guy, because when he came to the army, his mother was Israeli. He did the IQ test, and they saw he was off. He saw he was a brilliant guy, so they wanted him very much. They want the big brains there. Okay, but give them a chance. Societal changes always have to happen gradually. It just doesn't work otherwise. That's just the way it works. Right? Abrupt changes are usually unsuccessful. Give them a chance. Give them a chance.
We're already talking about starting up the protests again.
Oh, but part of the protests. But so anyway, so this is an interesting perspective. You see from the Rishonim, the Torah is called a mitzvah she'eino averes. So when we say that you have to close the Gemara to do a mitzvah, it's not because we're being more lenient when it comes to Talmud Torah vis-a-vis oisik b'mitzvah, patur min mitzvah. No, we're being more machmir. Because since a Torah is a mitzvah she'eino averes, if you followed the normal guidelines of oisik b'mitzvah, patur min mitzvah, you would have to stop learning Torah for every mitzvah, because it's a mitzvah she'eino averes. Torah could wait. But because Torah is special, because Torah is a greater mitzvah, that's what the Gemara in Moed Katan says, that even the mitzvahs can't compare to Talmud Torah. So we said that if somebody else could do the mitzvah for you, so let somebody else do the mitzvah. Somebody else could give a glass of water to somebody who's thirsty, let somebody else do it. Right? So let me repeat that, because this is the key point of the Rishonim. Right? According to the regular guidelines of Oisik mitzvah, patur min mitzvah, if you have a mitzvah that could wait, so stop the mitzvah and do the mitzvah that can't wait. But not when it comes to Talmud Torah. If somebody else could do the mitzvah for you, so then don't stop learning Torah, because Torah is so important.
The assumption is that the person who does the mitzvah, can do it
as well as you do. Very good. It's only a mitzvah she'ef shalasas ayidei acherim if that person could do the mitzvah as good as you could. But if you could do the mitzvah better, then it's not a mitzvah she'ef shalasas ayidei acherim. So you see number 39 in the reference sheet. By the way, this is a big chidush. If the Achronim would have seen these Rishonim, they would have been able to resolve a lot of difficulties, because of the Netziv, for example, right? He had a very difficult. He said, "Oisik b'Talmud Torah ein patur min mitzvah ela Talmud Torah kodim im efshar shatas ayidei acherim." Okay, so he doesn't understand the Rambam in number 38. The Rambam says that a man is mitzvah pirivya, right? Look at the last line of the Rambam, then Hilchos Ishus. And if you're learning Torah, you don't have to get married. Oisik b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah v'kol shekein b'Talmud Torah. Which means to say that when you talk about Oisik mitzvah, patur min mitzvah, which mitzvah gives you a greater patur, a greater exemption? The Rambam says Torah. If there's a din of Oisik mitzvah, patur min mitzvah by other mitzvahs, then all the more so that you have the din of Oisik mitzvah, patur min mitzvah when it comes to Talmud Torah. Talmud Torah gives you an even stronger exemption from Torah learning. So the Netziv says, I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense to me. Right? What's the kol shekain? Right? We're more mekel when it comes to Talmud Torah. When it comes to Talmud Torah, you have to interrupt your Torah learning to do mitzvah. So why does the Rambam say kol shekein Talmud Torah? It's not true. We're more lenient when it comes to Talmud Torah. So number 40, the Kovetz Shurim, Rav Elchanan Wasserman doesn't either understand this Rambam. Right? See, look at the second line of Rav Elchanan. V'kasha mashakas av Rambam da'isik b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah v'kol shekein Talmud Torah. Number 40. The my kol shekenu adra but Talmud Torah gara l'inyan zeda mitzvahs pirveri v'hi mitzvah she'ef shalasas ayidei acherim. Why does the Rambam say kol shekein Talmud Torah? We're not more stringent when it comes to Oisik b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah when it comes to Talmud Torah. We're more lenient. The Igros Moshe doesn't either understand. Number 40. Eza kol shekeinu. Ha'adarabba hu lahafech leinin hefsek v'din oisik b'mitzvah partim min mitzvah leka b'talmud Torah. Moshe assumes that there's no patur of oisik b'mitzvah partim min mitzvah when it comes to Talmud Torah. So why were all these achronim, the Nitzir, Rav Chanan, Rav Moshe Feinstein, why did they find this Rambam so perplexing? Because they were assuming that there's no patur of oisik b'mitzvah when it comes to Talmud Torah. When it comes to Talmud Torah, you have to close the Gemara, but we saw in the Rishonim that's not true. The reason why you would have to close the Gemara is because the Torah can wait. The Torah is a mitzvah she'eina everes. So we're more machmer when it comes to Talmud Torah. When it comes to Talmud Torah, we say that if somebody else could do it, you let somebody else do the mitzvah. So if these achronim would have seen the Rishonim, they would have not had this difficulty. Now, what about mitzvah pirviriva? Pirviriva can also wait. Pirviriva is not urgent either. You can wait. You can get married in 5 years. You can get married in 10 years. It's not a mitzvah that's running away. Just as Talmud Torah is not running away, getting married is not either running away. So therefore, you have a patur of oisik b'mitzvah partim min mitzvah. Generally speaking, we're more machmer when it comes to Talmud Torah.
Is the idea because if he's postponing,
Yes, somebody else, shemeak dimena acher, somebody else might take his wife. Somebody grab the woman.
you could say that about.
It's a nechanami. So if somebody else might grab the woman, then you can't. Then you have no. Then you can't say I'm learning Gemara. No. If somebody else might grab that girl, and that's the girl that's the right one, the basher. So then it's a mitzvah vera. So then you have to stop your learning Torah. But if there's no specific girl that somebody else might grab, so the Rambam says if I'm learning Torah, I could push off the wedding. But the Rambam says it's only if ein yitzam is garber love. If he doesn't have an urge to get married, people can't stay celibate. Human beings are not designed to be celibate. Human beings were designed to procreate. So the Rambam says if somebody is Yitzhar Mizgarberlov, he has to get married. The Chazon Ish writes in Igros that everybody's Becheskas Yitzhar Mizgarberlov. He says everybody is assumed to be in that category. Human beings are created with that urge to procreate. Okay. So, according to the Rabbeinu Menayach, he's like Misha Terasa Umnasai. Oh, by the way, number 43, I mentioned the Ran, the Gemara in Brachas, if somebody's digging a grave, so the Ran says, even when he's resting, he has a din of a Oisik b'mitzvah, pater min mitzvah. Okay? So I'd like to say the following. Chidush. You know, if somebody is learning Torah, so the idea of if he's Torah Umnasai, so then he has the patur of Oisik b'mitzvah pater min mitzvah. Because I think that if somebody's Torah Umnasai, for him, Torah becomes like a mitzvah iveres. If somebody devotes himself, I know it's a little bit of a chidush here, but if somebody totally devotes himself to Torah, so since he's so devoted for Torah, if he interrupts his Torah learning, so then he's going to lose out from the Torah. Normal people, the Torah could wait. You and I, we're not learning all the time. So Torah has the status of a mitzvah that's not urgent. The Torah learning could wait for tomorrow. But if somebody has completely devoted himself to Torah, so then it becomes a mitzvah iveres. So that's why if somebody is a Torah umrasa, he doesn't have to daven. Okay? So it's the same with Tzarech Tzibur. I think the idea is, this is my explanation of Rabbi Noach, why he has to be a klal mensch, why he has to be somebody who's totally devoted to Torah. Because if somebody's Oisik b'Tzarech Tzibur, there's no end. Just like Torah, there's no end. Torah has the din of a mitzvah for normal people. Torah has the mitzvah of a mitzvah that's not urgent because there's no end to how much Torah you could learn. So it's the same thing with Tzarech Tzibur. There's no end to how much money you could raise. If you're a fundraiser who's fundraising for public causes, so there's no end to how much money you could raise for public causes. So since there's no end, so therefore it has the din of a mitzvah she'eino averes. But if somebody's a klal mensch where he gives himself over completely to the klal, he doesn't do anything else, so then his mitzvah has the status of a mitzvah averes. It's a mitzvah that's urgent. It's a mitzvah that's going to pass. So therefore, if you're a person who once in a while raises money for your shul, or there's a fundraiser in your shul and you chip in and you help out a bit, so for you, the mitzvah of Tzarech Rabbim has the din of a mitzvah she'ein averes. But if you're like Rav Moshe Sher, where you give yourself completely over to the klal, so then for you, your Tzarech Rabbim becomes like a mitzvah she'ein averes. It becomes like an urgent mitzvah that if you don't accomplish now, So therefore, that's why you have to be somebody who's totally given over to the klal in order to have a patur from tefillah. That's the way I understand Rabbeinu Manoach. That's why the Rabbeinu Manoach compared Torah and Tzarchi Rabbim. Torah and Tzarchi Rabbim are two things where there's no end to how much you can do. And therefore it only assumes the status of a mitzvah, averes, an urgent mitzvah, if that's something that you totally give yourself over to. The Rabbeinu Manoach holds that if you have a specific cause, somebody needs help, there's a specific, then you don't have to give yourself over completely. Then it has a din of a mitzvah, an urgent mitzvah, even if you're not given over to the klal. But if you're talking about general things like fundraising, where there's no end to how much you can fundraise, then it only has the din of an urgent mitzvah if it's something that you completely give yourself over to. So therefore, I believe that's the pshat in the Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef said we compare somebody who's oisik b'tzorchei tzibur to somebody who's learning Torah, which means to say, just as when it comes to Talmud Torah, if you want the Talmud Torah to have the status of a mitzvah veras, an urgent mitzvah, it's only if you're totally given over to the Torah. It's the same thing with the Tzarchi Rabbim. If you want the Tzarchi Rabbim, the fundraising, to be something that's urgent, something that's considered something that can't wait, it has to be something that you're totally given over to. And the Yerushalmi holds, the Yerushalmi was the one that compared Talmud Torah with Kriyat Shema, and the Yerushalmi, look at number 47 on the reference sheet, that according to the Yerushalmi, Reb Shimon Bar Chai was patur from Kriyat Shema. Right? Can you see the Yerushalmi? The Yerushalmi holds that the Yesod, the root of Kriyat Shema is Talmud Torah, is learning Torah. That's the root of Kriyat Shema. It's a form of Torah learning. So therefore, according to the Yerushalmi, if somebody's Torah Nasa, he's patur from Kriyat Shema. So that solves the problem. We said that Tzarchi Rabbim has a patur from Kriyat Shema. Torah doesn't have a patur from Kriyat Shema. Well, if you go according to the sheet of the Yerushalmi, it was actually the Yerushalmi that said that Tzarchi Rabbim is like learning Torah. So since it was the Yerushalmi that made this comparison, that put the two on the same pedestal, and the Yerushalmi goes l'shitasa that if you're Torah Nasa, you're patur even from Kriyat Shema, so now the Rambam is miyushiv, the Beis Yosef is miyushiv. If you go according, the Chidush was that the Yerushalmi was comparing Talmud Torah and Tzarchi Rabbim. That just as Talmud Torah, if you're going to be patur from Kriyat Shema, it has to be Torah Nasa. It's the same thing with Tzarchi Rabbim. If the Tzarchi Rabbim is going to give you a patur from Kriyat Shema, it has to be something you're totally given over to, because only in those cases does the Talmud Torah and the Tzarchi Tzibur have the status of a mitzvah she'einei veres.
Rabbi said Kriyat Shema meaning the shir.
Right. So he's Nevi Chalik on the Yerushalmi. But perhaps it was a bit of a complicated shir. I'm not sure if that last section of the shir was quite complicated. I'm not sure if I managed to convey it properly. I don't like going over time, but we'll stop the shir. But even if you didn't have the knetch at the end, there's still a lot of informative stuff over here. But basically, just to finish up the shir, the idea is we have Rabbeinu Manoach that there's two mitzvahs that are endless. One is Talmud Torah. There's no end to how much Torah you can learn. And another thing is how much you can help the tzibur. There's no end to how much you can help the tzibur. And therefore, these are not considered urgent mitzvahs. You don't have to stop everything you're doing in life for these two mitzvahs, unless it's something you give yourself over completely to. That's the Rabbeinu Manoach. If you give yourself over completely to Torah, or you give yourself over completely to helping the tzibur, then the Yerushalmi that made this comparison holds you don't even have to say Kriyat Shema. You don't even have to daven. You don't have to do anything. If it's something that you totally give yourself over to. Okay, we'll stop over. I'm sorry for going over time.